Hello, this is Crystal Racing here with my mid-season review, talking about every team and driver, starting off with Williams, who of course are planted at the bottom of the constructors table with 0 points. Now, whilst technically that's basically the same as what they achieved last season so far, this season's car has been substantially better, much easier to drive, although of course the level of grip and the aero issues are still remain. But having said that though, we have had at least about 2 races where there's been massive attrition. Of course the first race in Austria, and of course the most recent race, the Tuscan Grand Prix at Mugello, and they failed to score points at either race. Of course, at Austria, Nicholas Latifi was on his Grand Prix debut, so I think it was a bit much to ask of him to score a point, although it would have been a fantastic effort had he done the job, considering he was chasing Sebastian Vettel, whose tyres had been battered from a spin. But more disappointingly though, George Russell missed out a chance on points, having chased the same guy for the final point position, but couldn't get close to him. Of course, so if I'm going to give any grade rating to Williams, it's got to be a D, because technically if I was to give the last season a grade, it probably would have been somewhere like an E- or an F, to be honest, because last season's car was just utterly horrific in every way possible. No grip, horrendous aero imbalances, just the car designed so poorly that, yes, whilst this year's car is not a great car, at least it handles like a racing car, and at least when you watch Nicholas Latifi's on board, at least it looks drivable, despite lacking any grip or much downforce in particular. So it's going to be a D for me for Williams, although they haven't scored a point yet. As for both Latifi and George Russell, I'm going to give them both a letter D. Latifi, solid effort so far, although he has had a few dodgy races here and there, such as Hungary, where he spun 5 times and ended up finishing 5 laps down. Although I have to say, the recent, and whilst he has generally tended to finish last in most races, at Monza he did finish 11th ahead of George Russell, beating him for the first time, and actually finishing in front of Romain Grosjean and Kimi Raikkonen. A very impressive effort that race was, although of course at Mugello he did end up retiring because of some sort of mechanical failure, but he did. But you know, in terms of qualifying speed, he's getting a lot closer to George Russell. I think he was only 3 tenths slower last time out at Mugello. That qualifying record, though, for George Russell does remain at 30-0, but I have to say George Russell is beginning to look a bit more scruffy recently. I don't know whether it's because he's now getting bored of the fact he's at Williams and maybe he's sitting there thinking, oh, I should be in a better car like the Racing Point or whatever, but something suggests to me that George Russell's standards have slipped a bit, and he's not quite that ready for that Mercedes seat as some people think. I know a D sounds a bit harsh because of course he's had some amazing qualifying performances where he almost got into Q3 at Hungary, but his race pace is actually quite average if you actually look at the lap times. Next up is Haas, who of course are sitting in 9th place with just 1 point. And the grade I have to give that car is, well, it's got to be an E, really. I mean, whilst of course it's a car that doesn't eat its tyres up like last year's car, this year's car, possibly due to the fact it has a Ferrari engine, which of course has had a lot of horsepower taken out of it because of some FIA directive. It's just slow now, and the car doesn't really produce much grip, it doesn't have much downforce, and both drivers are just slow, they can't really push any further because it's just a slow car. Of course, they got their only point at Hungary where Kevin Magnussen and Grosjean took advantage of a fantastic pit strategy to lead them up the order. As expected, both drivers gradually fell down the order, but Magnussen did succeed to score a point, although originally it had been 2 points when he finished 9th for the flag, but because of a penalty he dropped to 10th. Of course, Grosjean played an important role in helping him hold up faster cars behind them, meaning that Magnussen could hold on to the point in the wet dry conditions. But since then, Haas have just been absolutely abysmal. I mean, and as for how I would grade the drivers, I would also give both Magnussen and Grosjean a pair of Ds. Magnussen did start off the season a lot better than Grosjean, but as in the past few races though, Grosjean has been a much quicker driver. But, and I have to say, I think Grosjean's been a bit unlucky not to score points, but of course, because of damage and crashes and all that that's happened to him, he hasn't been able to get a point. Next up, it's Alfa Romeo, who are sitting on 4 points because, of course, Giovinazzi scored 2 points at Austria, and, of course, Kimi scored 2 points at the most recent round in Tuscany. Giovinazzi did start the season off a bit better than Kimi, if we're going to be honest, but it has to be said that with the exception of the British Grand Prix, Kimi has been more or less the quicker driver in race pace. Of course, the British Grand Prix was pretty much the only race I can remember Giovinazzi having the upper hand in terms of race pace, but that's it. Of course, at Austria, of course, Kimi's wheel came off. Of course, had it not been for that wheel coming off and the safety car screwing up his pit strategy, he would have finished in front of Giovinazzi. So, I mean, technically, in my eyes, I mean, Kimi should be sitting on 4 points and Giovinazzi on 1 point, but that's life. And, but having said that, though, Alfa Romeo are sitting in a very deserved 8th place because that car is just slow. Of course, the Ferrari engine really does not help matters. I'm going to get onto them very soon, don't you worry. I've got some very angry words for that team. Of course, in terms of rating the team and the car, I'll give them C- because, you know, it started off the slowest car so far this season, but as the season has gone on, they've improved it quite a lot to the point they're able to beat Ferrari. Might not sound much, but that is better than nothing. As for Kimi, he gets a C+, and Giovinazzi gets a D, to be honest, because at this rate he really doesn't look like he's going to have an F1 seat next season at all. On to the next team, a team that has been doing very well to the point they're only sitting 13 points behind Ferrari. That's right, it's the AlphaTauri team, aka the Toro Rosso team, rebranded. As for how good their car is, I'll give their car a B-. Very impressive, quite quick, okay, not ridiculously quick, could do a bit more downforce and a bit more horsepower from the Honda engine, but is a good effort nonetheless. Pierre Gasly, I've got to give him an A. Just absolutely fantastic so far this season. I mean, him getting out qualified at Tuscany and then getting taken out of the race was, well, probably only the second time this season I've seen Gasly get outpaced by Kvyat. That's it. Gasly has been absolutely on top form throughout the first half of this season. And of course, yes, I know some will say that win at Monza was a fluke, but he was there to take the win. What a win it was. I was absolutely ecstatic for him. And because of that win, he's now sitting in 10th place in the standings. Danny Kvyat, on the other hand, though, is down in 14th place with only 10 points compared to Pierre Gasly's 43 points. Danny Kvyat is now sitting down there in 14th place. He's having a very quiet year, and I have to say, he's going to be fighting for that seat very badly now. I mean, this is not good news. I mean, he better hope that Tsunoda doesn't finish in the top 4 in the F2 Championship. And, you know, if the team are looking to get rid of Alex Albon at the Red Bull team, I mean, he better hope that Albon has such a bad year that they just decide to give Albon a year off or something like that. Just like Danny Kvyat did during 2018. So, whilst the car has been given a B minus, Pierre Gasly has been given a grade A. I'm gonna give Danny Kvyat a D. Got to do much better, mate. And of course, you know this team is doing really badly when I'm talking about them this early on in the video. That's right, folks, it's Ferrari, who are sitting in 6th place after 9 races with just 66 points. You heard me right, they are in serious trouble. What can I say? They are now 17 points behind Renault. They are 26 points behind Racing Point, who of course got that 15 point deduction, and 40 points behind Renault, and of course 107 behind Red Bull. And wait for it, they are 259 points behind Mercedes. Utterly abysmal Ferrari, unacceptable. They've had at least 3 races where neither car scored a single point. The first one was at Styria, where Leclerc, like an absolute champ, decided to launch one up over Sebastian Vettel's rear wing and took himself and Vettel out of the race like an absolute champion. Belgium, where they got overtook by Kimi and they were absolutely miles off the pace all weekend long. Then of course they failed to score points at Monza because of course they were off the pace again, and they had mechanical failures. Vettel's brakes absolutely fried themselves, whilst Leclerc car lost balance and smacked itself into the wall. I've said everything. I think everything we've criticised this team for has been said now. This team is in serious dire straits, and it's not just Matteo Binotto who needs to be looked at. Joel Clear needs to be sacked, and Naki Rueda needs to be sacked. Many other people in that team need to be either sacked or have their positions reviewed. The whole mentality and everything about that team is completely wrong, and you know, the whole mentality of making the team as Italian as they possibly can is just moronic, because of the fact they've got rid of so many good engineers who were not Italian but got sacked because they were not Italian. That's just moronic. And the fact that they've had to replace them with people from the production car department, from the production Fiat car company, or even the production Alfa Romeo departments, just sums up the utter moronic downfall, that Ferrari's horrendous downfall. You know, and not only that, they don't have a hybrid culture going on in that team like they do in the German car companies. It's just hopeless. I mean, Ferrari are probably going to be screwed now because of the FIA rolling over their engine, where apparently they were injecting fuel that bypassed the FIA sensor, meaning that they could produce more downforce, but because they had to get rid of that, it means that their engine is now the weakest in the field. That's what you get for cheating, Ferrari, you absolute... I'm not even going to say it. It's going to be an F for Ferrari, absolute fail. Not just F for Ferrari, but F for fail. Charles Leclerc, I'll give him a B. And as for Sebastian Vettel, it's got to be an E for me. Oh my god, Sebastian, mate. How on earth have you got a contract at Aston Martin on the basis of your performances over the last 2 years, if we're going to be honest? Yes, I know. I mean, you know, the spins, the crashes, the incidents, and then of course this year's apparent lack of pace. Oh man, you are so lucky you've got a contract at Aston Martin, because you really are not the same driver who won all those championships at Red Bull, and of course at that stunning 2015 season that in your first year at Ferrari. You're not the same driver anymore. And you know, I kind of, there's a part of me that thinks that Lance Stroll might be able to beat you, if I'm going to be honest. I know that sounds a bit over the top, but judging by your performances, you just don't look like you should be even leading a team. I mean, maybe you might find your verve again when you go to Aston Martin next year, but I mean, it is going to be a much better car they've got there, and they'll be using 2020 Mercedes suspension and gearbox for next season. But it's time to really sort yourself out, Sebastian, because you really do look like a pale shadow of the driver you once were. Then, of course, at Renault, who are currently sitting in 5th place, I am going to give that team a C. Could be doing a bit better if I'm going to be honest. They're mostly only up in 5th because of the performances of Daniel Ricciardo, who has picked up 3 4th places and of course picked up a point for the fastest lap at Sport. Having said that though, their second driver Esteban Ocon has been okay. I mean, he's picked up 30 points, but Ricciardo's picked up 53. This has not been a great comeback for Esteban Ocon, who was highly hyped up to be the guy who should have replaced Valtteri Bottas for 2019, but all he's done is validated by Mercedes. Have kept on Bottas since then, to be honest. It's just been a very average season so far. So, I mean, and yes, I know people say, well, he's been out for a year, but I've got to say this, Esteban Ocon for me gets what do I say, a C minus, or maybe a D plus, but I'll just give him a C minus because he's got to do a lot better, and, well, why did he, yeah, I know he had a bit of bad luck at Mugello, but with his brakes overheating, and of course his car breaking down at Styria, but you know, he's had some very mediocre races like at Hungary and at the Spanish Grand Prix where he was struggling to overtake Kimi Raikkonen's Alfa Romeo. What are you doing getting stuck behind Kimi Raikkonen, who's 40 years old and is just driving around for a laugh now, mate? Oh dear, so yeah, it's a C minus for me. Whilst Daniel Ricciardo gets a B plus, very good effort all round. You know, scoring a lot of points, firing up Renault into 5th place ahead of Ferrari, and of course he'll be going to McLaren next year where he'll be in a much better car, and you know, if things go really well McLaren, he could be fighting for a championship come 2022. And then of course in 4th place it is Racing Point. Yes, Racing Point, the pink Mercedes. I will say this though, I mean, even though it is a good car, they don't seem to be particularly maximising it like the teams around them are. They've only had 1 podium so far this season, which of course came in lucky circumstances at Monza. And I have to say, Lance Stroll absolutely bottled a chance of winning, I have to say, with his horrendous restart. Could have won that race, but didn't. The team, I think, deserve a C. You know, good car, but they really haven't maximised it at all. Lance Stroll, I'm going to give him an A minus. You know, been very impressive this season. He's finally broken through. He's finally looks like a decent Grand Prix driver. I'm happy for him because I don't want to be sitting here slagging off like a vulture. But as for Sergio Perez, though, it has got to be a D. Very disappointing. I really am disappointed with Perez this season. We were all talking about how Perez would finally have a chance of fighting the big boys this year, but he's had no podiums. He is currently sitting in 9th place in the championship with 44 points. Yes, he was unfortunate to pick up COVID-19, which made him miss the races at Britain. But the thing is, though, he's been beaten an awful lot by Lance Stroll. Yes, I know he's had bad luck, like being shoved off the road at Monza by Verstappen, bad pit strategy at Spa, and then, of course, being given second-arm parts for the Mugello race. But, you know, he did get beat at Circuit de Catalunya by Stroll because of a bad start. Yes, I know, Lance Stroll's start pretty much kept Stroll ahead, but Perez didn't find a way past, which is disappointing. And then, of course, at Hungary, Lance Stroll absolutely destroyed him. Literally, Stroll just had a fantastic weekend, and Perez was nowhere to be seen. And then, of course, at Styria, Perez looked like he could have finished 4th ahead of Alex Albon, but then, of course, whacked into him and meant he was forced to limp over the line in 6th place, gifting 5th place to Lando Norris. Not good enough, Perez, mate. I'm going to have to I think, you know, giving you a D is an appropriate grade because this is just so disappointing. And, of course, you'll be out of a drive from Aston Martin for next season, meaning that, of course, you're well, unless Red Bull willing to hire an inexperienced driver, you're looking at Alfa Romeo or Haas for a seat next year. And if I was you, if those two seats were the only ones you could get at Alfa or Haas, I suggest you just go to IndyCar, because if you're going to those sort of teams at the age of 31, you're pretty much toast at this point. You might as well go to IndyCar and try and become a champion there instead. I know this is really brutal, but it feels like Sergio Perez has hit his maximum in Formula 1. I'll be sorry to see him go, but for me, he's always been a case of a very, very consistent Nick Heidfeld type driver who can't really go any further. Then, of course, we're looking at the team who are sitting in third place, McLaren, who I have to say I've not been as impressed as I thought I would be, but, they have been getting a lot of results in a car that I have to say is a little bit, I have to admit, it's no better than what they had last year at all, but, for the team, I'll give them a B, but for Lando Norris, wow, he's been one of the standout performers this year. I'm going to give him an A+. Very impressed all round. Hungary was the only bad race he's had all year round. Spain was a little bit poor, even though he finished 10th and scored 1 point. But, the performances have been so good. I cannot help but be very impressed by Lando all season so far. As for Carlos Sainz, I know he's had a lot of bad luck, but I'm going to give him B-. Yes, he's been a faster driver, but he's also had a lot of poor races, like the two Silverstone races where he finished 13th in both of them. Yes, I know we got a puncher at the first race at Silverstone, the British Grand Prix, but then he finished 13th again the following week. He's kind of, getting into more trouble than he should be. He couldn't start Belgium because of some exhaust failure. He did finish second at Monza where he nearly won, but of course Gasly held his nerve to win, and then of course Carlos Sainz was forced to retire when he got involved in that restart collision. Not his fault, but I have to say though, Lando has been outpacing him here and there. And of course at Styria, well, he did finish behind Lando, even though Sainz I don't know why he decided to try and get the fastest lap, but that's what he did. On to, of course, the team who are currently second, Red Bull, who, as you know, are only second because, let's be honest, Ferrari really should be second, but of course, they are currently getting away with the fact that despite the fact that they haven't really improved the car that much, despite changing philosophy to have a car that has more downforce, but as a result lacks balance, their second driver, Alex Albon, has been seriously costing them a lot of points. But it's not like that. It really matters because they haven't got anyone to fight with really for second. No one's threatening to take second off them. I mean, as good as McLaren are, that McLaren car is nowhere near close enough to Red Bull right now. And if I'm going to be honest, McLaren, just like Red Bull, have not really improved or worsened the speed of their car. Like Ferrari have gone backwards. Max Verstappen, A+. Yes, I know he's had a couple of dodgy races. I mean, his car broke down in Italy, and then of course his car bogged down at Mugello because of some power issue, and then got taken out by Kimi. Yeah, but in the 6 races he has finished, he won at the 70th anniversary race. He took the fastest lap and finished second at British Grand Prix, finished second at Spain, third at Spa, second at Hungary, and third at Styria. He's been literally the best of the rest. In the literal terms, once again, he's probably going to finish third for the season. It's an A star from me. Red Bull, I'm going to give them a B. The car could be better, but when you've got Max Verstappen in that car, I mean, if they did improve it, they probably, Max, I think, would have a chance to fight for the Drivers' Championship, especially if they can sort out the reliability. As for Alex Albon, though, it's a D. Yes, I know we got that podium at Mugello, but his performances have been really woeful for a second driver at Red Bull. He's currently sitting 5th. behind Lando Norris. Why on earth are you singing 5th place behind Lando Norris? That's not good enough, mate. Come on, Alex, seriously, like, I know you're struggling with the car, but you really, really, really need to sort out your race pace and stop losing positions at the start of races and stop having to try and overtake people you shouldn't even be fighting with. I mean, how was it? The 70th anniversary Grand Prix, I mean, you pitted and you had to overtake Kimi Raikkonen and Sergio Perez and Sainz, and I just sat there and thought, why on earth are you fighting with these guys? You... Not good enough, Alex. Just not good enough. Serious improvements need to come. Otherwise, Red Bull will have to replace you for 2021. Max, if he had a bare second driver, would be able to split the Mercedes a lot more easily if he had a teammate who could be within that pit stop window during stints, during in races. And actually, I'm not saying that the second Red Bull driver needs to be fighting with podium places outright, but he could do with pushing the Mercedes and Max Verstappen himself during in the early stages of races, because Alex Albon he's just a waste of a seat, I'm afraid. And of course his performance at Monza was just abysmal. He tagged Pierre Gasly around the outside into the first corner, meaning that he went over the one of the sleeping roadmen and damaged the floor of his car, and then of course he shoved Grosjean off the road a few laps later, meaning he had a 5-second time penalty, and he just had no pace really, and ended up finishing 15th, whilst the guy he replaced, Pierre Gasly at Red Bull, went on to win the race. So I mean, yes, I know some people say he's been unlucky with, of course, the first race in particular at Austria, where he collided with Lewis Hamilton, but, you know, Alex Albon's racecraft is a bit dodgy, I have to say. And yes, I know he might have been able to win at Austria, though, of course, he did suffer some electrical issue with 2 laps to go. So, I mean, essentially, because, of course, yes, the 2 Mercedes were having overheating issues, but Alex Albon's racecraft is not good enough. He just loses positions all the time. His confidence is poor. His anticipation is lacking. It's just he's all round lacking the capabilities to be a second driver at Red Bull. I mean, frankly, at this point, I'm beginning to almost sit there and think, you know, even someone like Kimi Raikkonen would do a better job than him at this point in time. You know, maybe getting Hulkenberg or Perez to be a second driver at Red Bull might be a good idea. But of course, the Red Bull guys, you know, Helmut Marko and Christian Horner, they're a very stubborn bunch, and, you know, it's going to take them a very long time to admit they've made a mistake in keeping Alex Albon in that seat, because he's nowhere near good enough. And then, of course, last but not least, it is, of course, the 2 Mercedes guys. Lewis Hamilton leading the championship by 55 points over Valtteri Bottas. Hamilton's leading Verstappen by 80 points as well. Goodness me, this championship is over, mate. Really sad to see. I mean, Lewis Hamilton has won 6 races in the first 9 races we've had this season. He's extended the gap between himself and Bottas by some margin in comparison to last year, because last year Bottas was actually quite close to Hamilton, but this year, though, it is literally light and day between the pair of them now. I mean, Lewis Hamilton is in a completely different postcode to Valtteri Bottas at this point. I mean, if you look at the point scores from last year for the first 9 races for 2019, Mercedes had 363 points, Hamilton had 197 points, whilst Bottas had 166. Bottas was only 31 points behind Hamilton, and his after 9 races, whilst, of course, this year Hamilton has 190, whilst Bottas only has 135. A real drop-off in performance for Bottas, I'm afraid. I mean, yes, I know he was unlucky with that puncture at the British Grand Prix where his tyre went, meaning he scored no points. Technically, he'd be up to 153 points if that was not the case, meaning he'd still be about 37 points behind Hamilton. But, you know, I think Bottas has tyres were punching earlier because of the fact that Bottas just can't look after tyres as well as Lewis Hamilton. It's as simple as that, and his race pace is nowhere near as good as Hamilton. Add to the fact that Monza, Bottas had an awful start, dropped to 6th, and then of course could only make his way up to 5th place after overtaking Kimi in a race where he had no penalties. Just, that is ridiculously poor. And of course Lewis Hamilton on the other hand dropped to 17th after his 10-second stop-go penalty and then finished 7th. Just 2 places behind Bottas and only 10 seconds behind in the finish. That is not great. Of course, looking at of course, I have to say though, interestingly enough, Mercedes have scored 325 points compared to the 363 they had scored last year. I'm not. I mean, yes, I would admit there's probably been driver errors that have contributed to that. You know, Hamilton's time penalty at Austria because he tackled with Albon. Bottas's poor performance at Hungary. Of course, losing the race at the 70th anniversary race at Silverstone to Max. The Monza debacle by both drivers, where Bottas was terrible and Hamilton made that stupid mistake where he came into the pits when it was closed. Meaning that Mercedes have actually scored 38 points fewer at this point in the championship than they did last year, because despite the fact that his car is on average about 8 tenths faster over a qualifying lap compared to the second fastest cars on average, but yet they've actually scored 38 points fewer. It's a very strange situation to say the least. Even though it is very interesting to see that Lewis Hamilton's gap over Max last year was actually 71 points, but this year it's 80 points. Mercedes are really, for me, are getting away with some pretty dodgy errors, but the reason why they're getting away with it because the position this year has been just so poor for some reason. Red Bull should be absolutely capitalising on Mercedes' error way more often, but because of course Max broke down at the first race in Austria and of course broke down at Monza, it meant he was forced to retire. Of course Bottas won at Austria whilst Gasly won at Monza. Yeah, I mean, in terms of rating the drivers, I've kind of got to give Lewis Hamilton an A. I mean, I would give him A+, but of course he did mess up at Austria and Monza, so I can't. Whilst Bottas, for me, gets a C-, just very disappointing, not good enough. And as for Mercedes, I'll give them an A. I mean, for me, last year, their performances were... The team rating for me in the first 9 races for Mercedes was A+, because they won 8 out of the first 9 races. And, of course, it took until the 9th race of the season at Austria for anyone else but Mercedes to win. And, of course, that was Max Verstappen overtaking Leclerc on the final lap. Of course, if you look at the point score for Red Bull this season, though, they have scored 173 points compared to 169 compared to last year. Although I will say, though, Gasly really did struggle in the 12 races he did for Red Bull. Hence why he probably scored more despite having 3 retirements for Max Verstappen and 2 non-point scores for Alex Albon, but yet they've actually somehow managed to score at least 4 more points. I mean, for me, Mercedes are just really cruising away at the front now. I mean, it's not even that difficult. I mean, obviously, they won't score as many points this year because, of course, there's only going to be 17 races this year. But even if they continue having idiotic, bad races here and there, it's not going to affect where they are in the championship. Hamilton is winning this championship with at least 2 rounds, well, at least 3 rounds to go if we're going to be honest, and Mercedes will probably win the championship by Turkey as well. Not much to say. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe to Crystal Racing, and I'll see you again very soon.